This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this great Thursday. I'm the Doc. Joining me today for the latest episode of DocNJock is my guy, Adam, the Jock Strozinski. Training camp the last month has been crazy. It's now officially over. The full practices, the media cannot attend any longer. The rest we're going to see the rest of the year is individual stretches and drills and things like that in terms of just basic getting out there. We're not going to see team periods or anything like that. So the last month, 16 practices is what we got to go off of. And there's a preseason game that's going to take place between the Lions and the Steelers this Saturday from Ford Field. So we're going to break it all down. Man, cuz I got to ask you right off the bat, how worried were you when you started getting the reports from inside Allen Park that Penei Sewell was hurt? Because it was crazy. The internet definitely felt it, a little bit of panic, but luckily, and I do think now the Lions are doing a good job, as well as the reporters, trying to get injury information, especially to key players, as fast as possible. It was reported within 6 hours that, okay, he's pretty good. And now we learned on Thursday that he rolled his ankle. It probably is not going to cost him any games, but man, it took the air out of practice, and everybody was just like, whoa. It was an intense scrimmage between the ones and the one offense and one defense. But my goodness, how nervous did you get when the alert hit your phone that Penei Sewell went down at practice?
I mean, when you look at this team, he's one of those guys that you can't afford to have him go down. He's one of those guys where if he has a serious injury, if he's really banged up, the season could be over before it ever gets started. You know, if we were to go through and make a list, Penei Sewell's in that top five. I think Jared Goff is probably number one. Amon-Ra St. Brown probably number two. Hutch probably number three. And then it's probably going to be Penei Sewell who will be the fourth guy, where if he's really banged up and he goes down for an extended period, you're just kind of like, man, write the season off. Like it was promised to us, and of course this would happen. There's possibly a jinx that we're going to talk about later on in the show where certain guys like Penei Sewell made a cover of a certain magazine that has seemed to have, you know, some mysterious things that have taken place. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on, but it's one of those things where when the news broke, you had to have gotten nervous. Like, you're like, oh man, please don't let this be serious. I think I said that out loud. It hit my phone and I looked and I was like, please don't let this be serious. Please don't let this be a big deal. We can't afford to lose this guy. He is way too important to this team. And, you know, look, Brett Holmes, Dan Campbell, I think they've done a great job adding a lot of depth to this team. I think they've done a really good job of building this team out to where if they do have a critical injury, they've got guys who can kind of help steady the ship. Penei Sewell's an elite offensive lineman, though. You can't just kind of reach in your grab bag and replace that type of guy. It doesn't matter what you do. All of a sudden, that right side of the line becomes dramatically weaker, and it leads to hits on Jared Goff, which then could lead to him getting injured. So I was nervous, man. I was incredibly nervous. I am happy that all sounds right with the world. It shouldn't be anything that's going to impact him. It doesn't sound like it's too serious. So I was pumped. I feel like the Detroit Lions, as this training camp has kind of wore on and as this preseason has gone on, they have been banged up. They've been nicked up, but they've done a good job avoiding any real serious injuries. And I think we can thank the lucky stars above that it's kind of worked out that way.
Yeah, it's a situation in which you see this football team with a fan base that's living or dying with the players, and you recognize, oh, you can't lose the best right tackle in football. So you realize, too, which is, I guess the best way to put it is when you see a bunch of injuries, it's football, and Dan Campbell does not run a country club. These guys hit. They want to be physical. The defense has taken it upon themselves to go after the offense. It's physical out there, and the scrimmage, cuz it was crazy. Literally, there's a story on Lions on SI. Vito wrote it. It was crazy. after practice, Brian Branch described it because everybody saw it. Jared Goff threw a football that was one of those balls that in the regular season, if he throws that ball to Brock Wright, a safety would have lit him up and sent him 15 yards backwards. That's how much it was a bad read. And Branch said, look, man, that was a bad decision by Goff. He let up and just gave Brock Wright a shoulder nudge, but everybody saw it. If it was a live rep, Brian Branch would have been able to levy probably one of the biggest hits you ever would have seen against somebody. And, I think he wanted to do it. I think he wanted to do it. But this football
I'm assuming he probably did. But
no.
With you being out there.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, no. It was one of those reps where you knew he kind of let up a little bit and just gave him a little love tap. But it was just hard enough to see that, oh, man, this was, it's something where they were in shells, not full pads. But it's one of those things where Brock Wright was going to get laid out. And that's what the defense has been doing all of camp. I mean, Branch tackled Jahmyr Gibbs in the backfield so hard that we all held our collective breath. So it's not a country club, and that's why when there's injuries, it sucks. But I think at the more time that you see it in person, you realize, man, it's football, and I'd rather have it that way than to kind of take a step back, because I think that's when maybe you could even hurt yourself a little bit more. And I think the lucky part for the Lions is it just seems like it's a bunch of minor things, hamstrings, soft tissue type stuff, things that can, with a couple weeks, luckily the timing of it, I think that a lot of the guys are coming back after the Steelers game.
Yeah, and look, with you being out at camp, some of the reports that I was hearing and some of the stuff that I was getting feedback on, it sounds like the defense has definitely caught up to the offense, and the offense might be lagging behind. What is your concern with where they're at right now today? Look, it's August 22nd. We've got a couple of weeks still before the regular season, so things will get shaped up. But right now, does it feel like the offense is a little bit behind and the defense is at least in front of the offense right now?
Yeah, and it stunk too, because you got to remember, no Jahmyr Gibbs, no Sam Laporta. That's a big deal. And where that kind of comes to where it impacts the offense is you recognize, okay, the defense has a lot of really solid players along the linebacking core. The defensive line is elite. And Ali McNeil, Aiden Hutchinson, they went out to go handle business. Levi Onwuzurike, you got Jack Campbell and Derek Barnes, and then you got Brian Branch. That's a lot. And you're missing two key members of your offense. But because I think the biggest concern, which now I think is something that has kind of permeated camp, and it's no disrespect to Khalif Raymond, but you can upgrade at the third wide receiver spot. And it's typically, Khalif will get his targets and he'll be successful. But what we're saying is that they need that big-bodied X-receiver that was the Josh Reynolds. It seems like people are concerned about it. I understand why, because opponents can take that away when you have so many good secondary players and linebackers. But the catch radius of Khalif Raymond, he had a really good percentage last year. I think that he was targeted 45 times and had 39, 40 catches. There weren't too many incompletions when the ball went his way. So I feel like I understand where people get a little bit of angst, but against that defense, the Lions offense struggled because they were looking for a Caden Davis, a DPJ to kind of step it up. And unfortunately, it was a lot of Amon-Ra who got a lot of love, and then they mixed in J-Mo at times where it just kind of it's been how it's always been, where he'll make a couple plays, but then a drop here, or the defense locked in on J-Mo. So it was good practice, and I think the defense, I truly believe the defense felt disrespected all offseason, saying, hey, wait a minute, like, man, you guys called us trash, or all you talk about is Goff and the offense and things like that. They came ready. So, yeah, I would say that the injuries made it so that the defense caught up and played at a better level. And it's like I said, I love to see it. The defense came out to hurt people. Like, they're not messing around. Like, they're the type that they're going to hit you, stand over you, and then laugh at you and say, get up, MFers. And it's crazy to see the continued ramping up of that. And now you got Derek Barnes, Jack Campbell, Anzalone, and Brian Branch, he's so nice off the field, but when he's on the field, the man wants to destroy people, and he's happy to play safety and hit people. So it's just great to see, and you hope it translates to the field, because if the defense gets to be top 15, it's going to make everything really great for the offense. Where do you stand with the wide receiver? Do you think that, okay, cut day is going to happen Tuesday, they just need to, 1,000 players getting cut, they just need to go find that person to make everybody happy, alleviate some anxiety? Because I feel like, we're going to talk about Vaki and his emergence, the rookie, the kicker, the defense, but I just feel like the wide receiver spot is the one that's making the most people anxious right now.
Well, I think it's what this offense is calling for, right? You can tell that Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson are looking for that guy who is plus 6'1", a solid 215. They're looking for that bigger wide receiver, that guy who can take up space, can get some tough yards in the red zone. They're looking for that guy. They gave DPJ numerous opportunities, a ton of chances. And it seems like just when he's starting to kind of turn the corner, he takes 3 steps back. And look, I think he's going to be cut. I think it's going to be a very tough cut for Dan Campbell to have to make, because he's given this guy so many opportunities. He wants that type of wide receiver. That's the prototype that he's looking for. And I just don't think right now on this roster, they have that guy. They have that guy that they're looking for, the guy who's come out and really showed out during camp. They've got a couple guys. There's a couple guys in that wide receiver room who I think are going to make the team and are going to make an impact on this team. But what they are specifically looking for, that player is not on this roster right now. So I think what you're asking, I think after cutdown day, they're going to be going through the bushel bin, and they're going to find a guy, and they're going to try to turn a guy into a household name. They're going to try to turn a guy into what Josh Reynolds was. Look, when they picked him up, that was a guy who was waived by the Rams. That was a guy who was completely discarded. Or maybe it was Tennessee. I know he played for the Rams and he played for Tennessee. I don't remember how it went exactly, but he was completely discarded. He was thrown away. And it was Rams, then he played for Tennessee. Tennessee got rid of him, I'm sorry. So they just got rid of him. And the Lions were like, nope, there's some value here. Jared Goff has a good connection with him. We can work with this. And they turned him into a guy who went out and got a good payday for himself. They're looking for that guy. They thought DPJ was going to be that guy, and it just, for some reason, hasn't worked out at all. So I think they're going to be looking for a bigger-bodied wide receiver, 6'1", 6'2". If they can get a guy who is athletic at 6'4", they'll probably take that as well. A guy who's got good hands. Like, they're not asking you to be a burner. They got a guy like that. That's J-Mo's job. They're looking at you to be able to take up space and catch footballs that are thrown to you and just run good, clean, crisp routes. That's what they want. And yeah, I think they're going to make that move, but it's going to be after cutdown day. What do you think the chances are that a guy like DPJ gets cut? And do you see this team having that wide receiver in the room right now that they're looking for? They're looking for that bigger bodied wide receiver to fill that Josh Reynolds spot.
Yeah, you said it. Great pickup by the Lions after Josh Reynolds gets cut by the Titans. The chemistry was there. Unfortunately, the ending wasn't so great with the drops against the 49ers, but I do think that DPJ is going to have a big game against the Steelers. He's got to have at least 3 to 5 catches, some impact. I do think that our evaluation is harsher than the Lions. They love his size. They love what he can do, and they're only really counting on him for like 10 to 12 targets. They look at it like from the perspective of kind of how I think it is, because you literally got Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, Sam Laporta, Brock Wright, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, now Vaki. That's 7 targets behind Khalif Raymond. So where are those targets? Like on third down, I don't want the ball going to DPJ. Maybe on 2nd and 1, you want to take a stab for a guy that can high point the ball, sure. But I don't want the football going to DPJ. So to me, if he's on the roster, I don't think he's going to have much impact. You just need him to maybe have a couple catches when you need to extend the drives. But third down, I want the ball in 14's hands, Gibbs' hands, Laporta's hands. And so I'm not as concerned about the spot. To me, he's out. I just don't think he's done enough based on tough evaluation. He's not the guy. You can find better. And I think Caden Davis is better. Isaiah Williams is better, especially with his dual role on special teams. So I at this point, he'll be out of my 53-man projection. I do think that they'll go with somebody else. But at the same token, they seem to be overly loyal. And the evaluation point is he did have Nate Sudfeld throwing him a bunch of balls, and the quarterback play behind Goff this training camp wasn't the best. It's just the way it is. It looks like backup play. There's a big drop off from Goff to Sudfeld to Hooker. It's just the way it is. So that might slant it a little bit more in DPJ's favor, but he's got to do something. Like, it's time, and I'm sure he's being told that. Like, okay, this is it. This is like the more or less your final exam. So get after it, because it's like, can they get a Michigan guy at wide receiver to do something? Let's go. And I do think that his position is in jeopardy. And another guy that probably is going to make it tough is two guys. What do you think about Craig Reynolds and James Houston? Because, listen, man, it's crazy. When you basically have a coach, a defensive coach, and your head coach say, hey, we tried to give you more stuff to do, and then you couldn't do it. And when you hear from coaches that we're going to take some off of your plate, that's never a good sign.
That's scary.
That's a scary sign. But I've been asked it a lot, like, what do you do? I think that James Houston has that trump card in that he's an elite pass rusher, so he kind of gets that free pass. It's kind of like that good-looking girl, but with shit for brains. You know what I mean? She's always going to get the attention. She's going to get the interview. Like, I'm not going to lie. If a nice-looking gal knocks on my door and says, hey, I want to be interviewed, I might take the interview, even though I know, oh, you have no experience podcasting? You don't know what a mixer is? You don't know who Adam the Jock Strozinski is? Well, okay, come in the door. We'll have a chat, and I'll learn something from you. But
I'll offer you a coffee. Take a seat. We'll talk.
Yeah, let's have some tea and discuss what your plans are here. But at the same token,
unbutton that top button on your blouse for me, thanks.
No, I can't say that legally, but I can think it in my head. But at the same token, James Houston has the trump card. He's got the thing that gets the attention. He can rush the passer. So I think he makes the roster, but I agree with a lot of everybody else. He's the 53rd guy, and he's got a skill, and he'd be scooped up in a heartbeat. So it's just unfortunate that look, at the way I'm going to perceive it is, you at least have to showcase the skill. You at least got to do the thing. You know what I mean? You got to go out there, and if you're out there behind Davenport and you're asked to go out there on third down, you got to make an impact. But I just think that maybe in his head he's a bigger star than what it is, but it's been unfortunate because he had the star shine bright the rookie year, then the injury, and now it's just kind of been up and down at camp, where you're not writing 41 down a lot in my notebook, or you haven't seen his name do a whole heck of a lot in the preseason games. So James Houston's tough, and then I think the other one now, but he got hurt. I'm curious to see the impact. Craig Reynolds, man, he was great. He was having a nice camp. I think he took it personally that the Lions drafted Vaki, not in a bad way, but clearly they drafted his position. And I think he's a guy that blocks well. He's a little bit better runner than Vaki, but Vaki has the higher upside. So I think Reynolds makes the roster, but his injury, you've been seeing a lot of the guys go down and get those injury settlements. So I'm curious to see by the time this recording ends or by Friday, is he still going to be okay? Because I do think he's valued. He's a glue guy. He's gritty. He's ultra business wise. I like his mindset. He's not all flash. It's just show up, run hard, block, catch the ball, go handle business, and do your thing. But it's just kind of like one of those guys that it's a Dan Campbell guy. But I think that the ceiling for Vaki and Gibbs is a little bit higher than Reynolds, so it makes it tough to evaluate because you got a guy Vaki that's a little bit kind of doing some things and can develop. So it'll be tough. But I do think that right now my 53-man roster will have 4 running backs on it.
Yeah, look, I think James Houston, I think this could be a very good sign for him, right? This could be that wake-up call that he needs. If you listen to what JMO said, JMO has basically said something similar without saying it exactly. He said he needed last year. He needed to work with Teddy Bridgewater. He said his headspace wasn't in the right place, which to me means that he thought he was a bigger star than what he was, and he thought he was going to show up and it was going to be easy, and he needed last year to really learn how to put the work in. I think with James Houston, I think he flashed on the scene so quick, and he had such a positive impact on this team. Then he had the injury, and I think he was expecting to bounce back. And I think that the team itself, the coaching staff, the head coach, everybody was expecting more out of him. And they were looking to give him more because they thought that, hey, you had last year essentially off. You could learn a couple of things, and now can you put it into work? And you've seen that it really hasn't translated. It really hasn't. His development hasn't really taken that next step forward. It's kind of stalled out. And you're right. The one thing he does well is the one thing that most teams are looking for. He is an elite pass rusher. He has a quick step, and he has the ability to get to the quarterback. That's fantastic. But I think what they're looking for is they're looking for versatile pieces who can do multiple things and help pick up slack where slack needs to be picked up. And right now, he seems like he's a guy on that defensive end chart. He's going to be the last guy to make the team. I think he makes the team, but it's one of those things where if they had a better option, they probably would move on from him. But I think right now they've given him every opportunity, and I think they believed that he was going to be able to take that next step, and they didn't really go ahead and add an elite guy to that roster who can get to the quarterback. So this is kind of where they're at. He makes the roster, but I think it's by default. And then with Craig Reynolds, I think Craig Reynolds has shown you time and time again, he's not nothing flashy. He's not this elite running back, but he's a guy who can go out there and do a lot of the small things, does a lot of the little things. But the problem is they went out and they drafted Vaki. And Vaki has shown this preseason, at least to me, I've been incredibly impressed with Vaki. I think Vaki has been awesome to watch. He's been a lot of fun. He does a lot of different stuff. And to me, he is like Jahmyr Gibbs, the Aldi brand. You know what I'm saying? Like if Jahmyr Gibbs is Coke, Vaki is whatever the Aldi brand of Coke is. He's just like, he's the generic version of that. He can do a lot of things, catching out of the backfield, run between the tackles. He's elusive, makes guys miss. On top of that, the weird thing about Vaki is he can give you the special teams play, and if you really need it in a pinch, the guy has played defense. So he's so well-rounded. Those types of things are important to this coaching staff. Those types of things, they hold in this like miscellaneous category that they check off, and it becomes a gigantic plus for you. And Craig Reynolds, unfortunately, he's a running back. He's a good running back. He will give you touches. He'll get you yards. He does a lot of the small stuff. He's not good enough to be your number one, probably not good enough to be your number two, but he is a number 3 running back. I think Craig Reynolds is on the outside looking in. I think he gets put on the practice squad if he's able to make it through. And I think when there's an injury, he's first guy up, which is unfortunate because I really like Craig Reynolds. Craig Reynolds is a guy that I'm always pulling for. But I think Vaki has flashed onto the scene and has looked so good through this preseason. And I think there's a couple of guys that have done an incredible job this preseason. Vaki, obviously one of them. Right, like I said, he is the Aldi brand of Jahmyr Gibbs. He can catch out of the backfield, run between the tackles. He's fast. He's elusive. He's got a little bit of wiggle to him where he can make guys miss. And he looks like he's a guy who is always looking to get better and always looking to gain yards. He's not willing to go down. He is willing to take a bump and keep on falling forward, which is something that Dan Campbell loves. And then you look at Isaiah Williams. Isaiah Williams, I know Dan Campbell came out, I think it was earlier this week or maybe it was late last week. Dan Campbell came out and was like, look, it's kind of stacked against him. We already have a bunch of slot receivers, and they view him as a slot receiver. But the thing is, he's gone out there and done nothing but perform. This guy looks like he is going to make this roster. I think he is going to be your 4th wide receiver. I know they want to go out and they want to get a 3rd wide receiver to spill Khalif. But I think this guy, I think Isaiah Williams makes this roster, and I think he makes this team better because he makes the roster. What has been your impression of Isaiah Williams through this preseason? Do you believe he has a shot to make this roster, even though the deck is a little bit stacked against him?
Clearly, I think he's talented. He's putting in the work. He's staying after. He's respecting Khalif Raymond and doing what Amon-Ra St. Brown says in regards to putting in the work. I think that his contract dictates that he's going to make the roster. I think that he's got a lot of special teams abilities, so I see him being a glue guy, somebody that can do a lot of things, and I think that it's going to be a nice story because he put in the work. He did everything that he was asked of him. I think, the guaranteed money, he got over a couple $100,000 as an undrafted free agent. which is definitely something that indicates the team is interested. So he's going to be with the organization. I do think that he would choose to stay and stay on the Lions practice squad if he doesn't. But it is a dilemma because you can't really put him on the outside. So you just kind of mix and match at times Williams and Khalif Raymond. So I do think there's return opportunities for Isaiah Williams. This will be another big game for him. I think that another final exam for him to show what he can do. And I do think he'll take advantage because he's made plays. He was targeted a lot, I think, against the Chiefs, and he kind of made a name for himself. So he's in. I think he's one of those guys that's in that would have to play his way out by having a bad mistake. Unfortunately, the guy that gets the default cut is Calhoun. You can't drop the ball in a preseason game. That's always the kind of thing where you go, oh, Calhoun drops it, and that's going to be a wrap. And so I think it makes it a little bit easier for the Lions. Traquan Smith, unfortunately, got released because of an injury, and Antoine Green, unfortunately, waived because of an injury. So that was challenging. But the spot is tough, and I do think that Doris Fountain was the camp darling, but unfortunately, he kind of has tapered off the last 2 weeks. It kind of was like the lights got turned on, and it was like, okay, it's showtime. You got to the arena, you got the marquee with your name on it. Now you got to go out there and entertain the people. And it hasn't happened. So he's a guy that's a big body and is athletic. So I think him, Caden Davis, Isaiah Williams will be three guys that will need this football game to really showcase why they need to make it. And that's why Dan Campbell's comments were telling, which was really honest because it makes sense. There's really only 5 or 6 spots. And you recognize, okay, one of them probably Jake Bates. He's the kicker. You realize, okay, Isaiah Williams is going to take a spot, probably Betts for defensive line help. You look at it and you say, okay, Iguakun, the offensive lineman, will provide depth. So there really is only a couple spots, and I think it's going to be probably Isaiah Williams or Fountain or Isaiah Williams. Maybe it's DPJ and Isaiah Williams. You never know. But Caden Davis has kind of been that guy that Dan Campbell says, just, hey, show up and make plays. And that's kind of what he's done. But unfortunately, there's still some things that he showcased against the Chiefs that are a little bit fundamentally unsound in terms of checking for the football, route running, stuff like that. So I think Caden Davis is perfect to develop. So is there a player that you say, okay, you're going to be paying close attention to before we start talking about who shined at camp? Because there's a couple guys probably along the offensive line you could say, all right, you want to see a little bit, but I think that most likely the biggest position that has the competition will be tight end, and I think maybe the spot that we're all talking about, tight end and wide receiver, will be the spot that will have the closest battle for a roster spot.
Yeah, and look, I agree with you 100% because I don't think Shane Zylstra or Mitchell has really done a ton this preseason to really separate themselves from each other. To me, they kind of feel like one's the white version of the other guy and the other's the black version of the other guy. They kind of feel like they're the same right now. I think if I had to pick between them, because I don't know if they're going to keep 4 tight ends in that room, right?
No.
To me, it screams only 3. I think Zylstra gets the nod.
Correct.
And it's just because I think he's maybe put a little bit more on film. He has a little bit more tape. And I don't know what you end up doing with Mitchell. I don't know if you try to sneak him onto your practice squad or not. But to me, it's that position group along with the wide receivers. And it's really at this moment in time going into this game, I feel like it's Williams' job to lose. You've done a great job. You've done everything asked of you through this training camp. You've got one more hurdle to get over. If you can have a good game, it doesn't even have to be a stellar game. Just have a good game. If you're on special teams, no drops. If you're a receiver, make a couple of catches, get upfield, get a couple of yards. Just do the things that are asked of you. If you have to block on a play, make sure you seal off your guy and block. To me, it feels like Williams is right there at the finish line. All he's got to do is basically cross it. Don't fall over it. Just cross the finish line, and it's your job. And I think what will end up happening is they will figure out what they're doing with that 5th/3rd wide receiver. But to me, I'm in lockstep with you. It's those two position groups that I think they've got some question marks on. Because when I look at this team in look, if you take Dan Campbell at his word, where he's like, look, we've got, I think it was 5 or 6 spots, he said. I think Baki's making it. He's done a great job. I've already talked about him. I've already talked about Williams. I think he makes it as well. I think Zylstra's the guy from the tight end room that makes it. And then I think it's the safety, Brandon Joseph. And I think safety, Brandon Joseph, because defensive back is a position that you're constantly needing guys. Guys are constantly going down. I think Brandon Joseph has had a couple of good games. I think he's been around the football quite a bit. I think he's done a good job of making plays. I don't think he's been exceptional, but I think he's made plays. And I think this is a guy that you can put into a spot and you're going to expect him to do said thing and make a play. And then I've been impressed, I've been impressed with, I'm going to mess up the last name, so I'm going to need you to help me. Isaac Uku. All right, thank you.
That's tough, right?
Some of the African names I struggle with, but I've been impressed with him. I think when you see his film, you watch what's going on in these preseason games. This guy is always flashing around the ball. He is usually in the mix making a play. He is there kind of blowing up a spot, or he is in the vicinity of where the tackle is being made. To me, he's a guy who is always around the ball, and you want that. So those are the guys that if I'm Dan Campbell, these are the guys that I'm watching because I've got them on my list, and they're looking like they're making my team. And like I said, you just need to go into this last game and you just need to perform a little bit, and you're going to cross that finish line. You're going to make this roster. Also, I've been incredibly impressed with Jake Bates. Can we just talk about him for a quick minute? Because in the game against the Chiefs, right, this was a guy who I believe he went 4 for 4 that game. He did have the missed extra point, and that's always a little bit alarming because those should be gimmies, but since they've moved the kick back a little bit, they are not. But this guy has hit at every level that you've asked him to hit at. 30, 40, 50 yards twice. This guy has shown the ability to drill the kick, and he sends it right down the middle. And this was a guy that coming in, I had some concerns because of the league he was coming from. He's coming from the USFL. He was a guy that, kicker, it's always a question mark. To me, kickers are very similar to goalies, where it's a lot of mental stuff, right? You have the spotlight on you sporadically throughout the game, and when the spotlight is on you, it is the brightest, and you are expected to make that play. You are expected to finish, and you are expected to complete what your job is. And every time that the spotlight has been on him, he has completed his job, and he has finished, and he has looked great. I've been incredibly impressed with Jake Bates.
Yeah, you should be. You look at a player that has the intangibles, got the big leg. In practice, he sprays the ball all over the place a little bit, but I think he's going to gain confidence from kicking at Ford Field against the Steelers. I think he's going to probably have another good performance. It's tough because clearly he was the kicker at camp. They wanted to develop him. They wanted to give him each and every opportunity to kick as many footballs through the uprights as possible. It's just, look, he's not experienced. So he hasn't kicked a 60-yarder to win an NFL game. And that's just totally different when you're on the road. Luckily, the Lions play a lot of games indoors, so the elements are not going to be a factor. I do think that, Dan Campbell will try to protect him as much as possible. He's going to get a lot of opportunities to kick between 40 and 55. Now, the question mark is going to be, are you going to take some chances and kick it from 58 yards out if you trust your defense? It's probably going to be predicated on how the defense plays. If the defense is having a good game, making stops, he may kick a 60-yarder. But, I do think that Dan Campbell is going to put the pedal to the metal and trust his offense. But Jake Bates gives you a little bit of comfort in that he's got the intangible. He's got the leg. He can make a lot of kicks. But, man, I just would be a little bit uncomfortable if it's a playoff situation in which it's a 54-yarder and he's got to make it in the postseason on the road or at home. My heart would be pounding, and it would be great to see him get through it. It's just unfortunate. I love him on the roster, but you just also experience also matters in terms of doing it. And you just look at a Butker and how good he makes it, how easy he makes it. Bates has been a little bit up and down, inconsistent. I do think he makes this roster because they liked the prospect of developing the guy that has the part that you need first. You need to have, like we said about James Houston, you need to have the skill, and Bates has it. The football just flies off his leg. Now, the question has always been to Dave Phipp, and we've asked it to him, is how do you teach accuracy? And it's just consistency. It's about getting those reps and practicing and doing what you got to do, knowing your spots and knowing what you can do and things like that. And I think Jake Bates will get there. I think he'll be an NFL kicker. But we're talking about 2024 first season, handling the pressure with a Super Bowl. It's basically giving a 21-year-old a Ferrari and saying, yeah, you're an A-plus student, but you're still 21. You're still probably going to have a girl in your car who's going to say, hey, will you throttle it up to 80? And you got to be like, we're in a 45, but are you going to impress her and do it or not? And most guys will. They'll think about it to impress the girl. So it's going to be fascinating to see, is he mature enough to handle it? Can he handle the ups and downs? What happens if he misses a game winner? What happens if, he misses an early kick in a game and he's on the roster? Does that mean 3 more missed? Because we all know kickers, they are, individuals that when their confidence dips, they can spray footballs even from 30 yards out. So yep. I hope it doesn't happen to him. He's a very likable individual, hard worker, very personable. He likes Detroit Sports Podcast. So I'm happy. We're all rooting for him. Hopefully that he's a guy that hopefully your offense is good enough that you don't need him, because Lord help the Detroit Lions if they need to kick a field goal late in a playoff game and Jake Bates is called upon. You're going to have an anxious fan base no matter how confident everybody thinks. So I'm curious, who's impressed you at training camp? I know that I can say that clearly the guys that you count on, they're ready. McNeil, Aiden Hutchinson, dominant. Jack Campbell, Alex Anzalone, Derek Barnes, they're ready. Carlton Davis, I think, is ready to prove that he can play CB1. I think on offense, clearly you need to play. 14 is just because it's a blessing to go see him, because the best way to put it, he's a natural. You need to play, he's open. Literally 10 catches in a scrimmage with the defense knowing that he's going to get the ball. He's just in the spots. Like, it's impossible based on his knowledge of angles and the inside slants and the screens and where to position himself. Literally, because Amon-Ra St. Brown is unguardable. You cannot guard him. He'll find the opening. He'll find the crease. Ben Johnson will create the crease to get him the football. The throwing lanes are created so beautifully this is not easy to do. Like, getting open in the NFL is not easy. Amon-Ra makes it easy day in, day out. Every day that ends in Y, Amon-Ra has done well. Goff has been up and down a little bit, but he did have one practice where he lit it up. J-Mo's been a little bit more up and down, but I think that the experience that he'll get this year, by the time the playoffs start, he'll be more seasoned and more consistent and ready to contribute. So your contract guys, all the ones that got paid, have showed out. So to me, the most impressive person has been Aiden Hutchinson. He's ready to go, and he's looking like he's going to be putting together an all-pro season. And Ali McNeil's hungry. He wants that fat payday. What's caught your eye? What have you enjoyed reading about?
What about Onwuzurike? There's been a ton of about Onwuzurike, and I think it was pretty telling, right? So the week before the first preseason game, you have Dan Campbell coming out. There's a lot of different reports with the media about Dan Campbell basically talking about how well he's played. And then you're expecting to see him in that first game. You don't. You don't see him in that second game. And I think the question was asked, I don't know if it was this week or if it was last week. It was basically like, have you seen everything you needed to see from him? Like, has he given you everything that you need to get? Because you're not playing him. And his answer was like, yeah, we've got all we need from him. So I think the most interesting thing is, this is a guy that was drafted, 4 years ago, and really hasn't had a chance to play. He was supposed to come in and he was supposed to be that smash brother with Aleem McNeil, and he just hasn't been able to get on the field. He hasn't been healthy. He's been banged up, and now it seems like this is the first time. And the thing that has me scared is it's a contract year. This is the first time where it sounds like he's 100% healthy and he's ready to go, and he's going to step into the season, and it feels like, and it sounds like, this guy is going to take starters reps, and he is going to help solidify that interior of that defense. And to me, I think that's what's been most impressive and most interesting, because I need to see it translate. I haven't seen any game action with him doing this. Practices, it has sounded like it's been great, but I haven't seen any game action with him going up against other ones. And it sounds like he's going to be a guy who's going to be counted on until DJ Reader gets his legs back underneath him. So to me, it has been Levi Onwuzurike actually having a rebirth and making this team and becoming a starter, being the guy that they drafted him to be years ago, because we haven't really even seen him on the field throughout his career as a Detroit Lion. So to me, that is what's been most interesting and what's been most impressive is the way this coaching staff has bought into his level of play and the way this coaching staff is believing and pumping him up and building him up. So I'm hoping it all translates into game one, because it has been a bit of a ride to hear a guy who, I'll be honest with you, I was ready to cut and discard, and I had zero expectations going into the season for, because he hasn't given you anything in the previous 3 years, to now being a guy who's like, all right, they're going to have a decision to make at the end of the year. If all of this is true, they're going to have a decision to make at the end of the year, how much they've got to pay this guy to bring him back, because he sounds like he is that important of a piece right now.
Yeah, it's Levi is a player that put in the work, and a lot of players on defense were rooting for him. And cuz we haven't even talked about the fact that you haven't even seen DJ Reader, who showed up and was gracious enough to join the Lions podcast and have me get made fun of for how short I am, which to me is hilarious, because what did you want? You wanted a podcaster to be 6'4" and 350? Sorry, guys, I'm 5'3" and 195. I'm sorry. And we were in a Detroit public school at a charity event, so I wasn't going to roll out a leather chair for the guy. So come on. No time and place, but it was funny. I respect you guys for noticing that he dwarfed me and made me look like his mini me. I get it, no problems, but I still brought you the news that, no timetable. It'll be interesting to see after next week to see, does he get put on PUP, because that will end his first 4 weeks of the season. I kind of lean towards that.
Do you think that happens?
I do. I think it's going to be PUP. I think
really?
Yeah, because think about it. The first thing Dan said is we're going to try him in individuals next week. So that's next week. Then do you think he's going to have a full week of practice and then play against the Rams? I don't see that. So that's one game missed. Do you then say, okay, have him ready? I feel like the next 2 weeks would be kind of rehab weeks and conditioning. I think that it's in the best interest of everybody, because you get the bye week. You get 4 weeks, I think, and then an opportunity to have a bye week too. So I'm looking at it like, you know what? Maybe you delay it a little bit and you let him get his full legs under him. He comes back and you're ready to go. So I do think so, but you never know. Maybe the team will say, okay, you had all of camp to kind of get your legs under you and stuff like that. But he hasn't done much. He's been there. He's been rehabbing. But NFL work is totally different. And the Lions have always been like a team that gives players 2-3 weeks once they return to kind of get their NFL legs under them. And the Lions still have Broderick Martin, who's played well. He's taking strides forward, and you got Levi. So I love the front four of Aiden, Levi, Broderick, and Aleem, and then you bring in Davenport and James Houston on the edge as well. It's good to start. So I've been impressed with the defensive line. It's been very impressive to see what they're capable of doing with an experienced defensive line coach. So there's a lot of good positivity there. I think that was one of the bigger things I took out of that second preseason game was that second string D line held their own against those starters. Yes.
Like that was the Chiefs' number ones.
Yes.
And they did a great job. I think Mahomes had 2 drives, maybe had 3 drives, but they held them to basically 6 points. They forced them into 2 field goals.
Yeah.
And that's saying a lot, because that offense is so potent. Now, look, I know it's all vanilla. They're running vanilla coverage just like the Chiefs are running vanilla plays. It's all vanilla pudding. I get it. But the fact that they were able to go out there, hold their own, and yeah, exactly. I think that was enlightening to see, because the defense, that was one of those things last year where, and even you go back a year prior, and you're just like, man, if we just have like an average defense, just something middle of the pack. And they had an average defense last year, and they were able to make it to the NFC Championship game. But if you really drill down and look at that defense, I think they had like the 28th ranked defense against the pass, which was the shits. And then you had, I think, the 3rd or 5th ranked defense versus the run, which is great. You need to kind of bring those two together. It'd be great if you had a top 5 rush defense and a top 5 pass defense, because then you just have probably the number 1 defense in football, which would be fantastic. But it's one of those things where you really needed that pass coverage to get brought up closer to what that run defense was. And I think you're seeing it now. Yeah, you've got some young corners, and yeah, you've got a couple of veterans mixed in there, but I think that secondary is going to be much better. I think you've got a really good front 7 who is going to make things very difficult. I think those passes to the flats, I think those tight ends are going to have to earn every yard they get. And I think what's going to happen is it's going to allow that secondary to really go out and make plays. I'm expecting guys to be ball hawking, and I'm expecting guys like Kirby Joseph, Iffy, Brian Branch to be turning guys over regularly, causing interceptions, forcing fumbles, stripping the ball. And I'm expecting this to be a very opportunistic secondary. And it's going to start with that defensive front, and they're going to be rotating those second string D guys in. And it's going to keep those first stringers fresh. So I'm expecting the defense to have a pretty dramatic turnaround.
Yeah, and then we haven't even talked about Marcus Davenport, who, if he stays healthy, he's looking good too, and he can teach Levi and Mekhi Wingo all the tools of the trade and tricks. And so this defensive line could be very, very serious. And I do think that Brad Holmes, once the season gets going, I do feel like when the opportunity to make some trades at the deadline, I think they're going to be active. They're going to see this football team is going to be hungry and right there. And literally, I think you just make a trade just to boost the confidence of the team. Like, okay, it's go time. It's like one of those last reminders. Hey, we believe in you. Now we've given you an additional piece, and I just can't wait to see how this season plays out.
You brought up trades. Were you surprised? So today there was a trade in the NFL where the Eagles acquired Jahan Dotson. And Jahan Dotson played at Penn State. He was a really good receiver in college. I thought he was going to be a pretty decent receiver in the NFL. I thought he really didn't have any quarterback play in Washington. So I thought it was a little bit hard to kind of judge what he truly is or truly was. Are you surprised that the Lions weren't involved in that? Because it didn't seem like a ton to give up to get him, especially when you're spending 3rd-round picks on possibly backup quarterbacks and guys like Broderick Martin, who have been a bit of a project. You could go out and get a receiver who could possibly fill out that 3rd receiver slot like we were talking earlier. Were you surprised that the Lions weren't involved in that?
Well, I look at it and I say no, because they don't have a 3rd rounder to give. And because, remember, they made the trade to give that up. So they don't have, which is interesting because a couple of the NFL trades have involved 3rd rounders. So the Lions don't have it. So that's one thing. But second of all, pay attention. A couple of the executives that were part of the Lions went to the Commanders. So the same group of people that traded Jahan Dotson evaluated him, and it wasn't going to be a fit. So that clearly expresses to me the Lions are not interested in Jahan Dotson. They passed on him the first time. I don't think they saw a discovery of a guy who got 1,000 yards over 2 seasons to say, oh, this is the guy. I think that, he's very much a speedster, but I think that the Lions are hesitant. Like, it's just the way it is. And an NFC championship caliber team, you have to respect their process. You can't check 3 out of 5 boxes. You got to check 5 to get a free agent contract or to make a trade. That's how stringent and the way they've stuck to their process. And so you have to respect it. I thought they passed on him once, and once he got traded on Thursday, I said, I get it, but I do think they're looking more toward a veteran, somebody who's been through it before, somebody that has kind of showed that they can do things and is consistent and maybe is a surprise cut. So we'll see. But like I said, the Lions have shown loyalty to guys that we have said, like Chase Lucas made the team a couple times, and we were like, what? And he made some plays, but eventually the team parted ways. So I think DPJ is that guy that kind of just has caught the attention of the coaching staff, and they like the framework of his development. And it'll be intriguing to see because they haven't really given him a lot of opportunities with the ones to just see what he could do. And it's just unfortunate because with the 2s, he'll make a play, but then he won't position the right way to beat a much smaller cornerback. So it's crazy. it's crazy to see with DPJ and how it goes. But the Lions have gotten so much attention that it was really, I was shocked because I can share. I had learned a little bit about the SI feature and what was going on a little bit beforehand, and I knew it was going to drop on Thursday today, and it was great. It was like a culmination of we had a good run covering the camp, and then you get Sports Illustrated putting the juice behind the project of the Detroit Lions, and and it was crazy. Like to see the response on Twitter and all over the internet. People love the cover, and it just is a little bit heartwarming. It bothered me a little bit. I don't know if you heard the radio station 97.1 kind of always does the whole, well, Sports Illustrated is not the same as before. Well, no shit, Sherlock. It's not the most featured magazine in the world anymore because nobody reads magazines. And Amon-Ra St. Brown said it. It's like, kids don't typically read magazines too much anymore. It's more digital based. So the company didn't disappear, dipshit. They decided to say, hey, let's transition from featuring all our investment in a magazine into a little bit more digital content. And so they invested in different type stuff that would be more prominent. So I just think that, there's still a lot of ignorance regarding Sports Illustrated, but I can't spend my whole life telling people that they invest and they put money in, they're around, they're thriving, they're doing great stuff. And but all I can do is say this. When the Lions showed up on the cover of Sports Illustrated, the internet blew up. And to me, it almost brings a tear to my eye because, it means something. And it always will mean something because there's been people really cranking out good work. And you can always pick apart things, and I understand that. But to see everybody go, holy shit, the Lions are on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Oh, my God, the writers picked Sports Illustrated to the Sports Illustrated national writers picked the Lions to win the Super Bowl. The undercurrent of positive praise. The photo was on point. It was a legit SI product that, when done right, with good foundational work, with national journalists that have experience doing that kind of work, that can get their foot in the door and talk to Jared Goff, Taylor Decker, Khalif Raymond, and do the work. I mean, come on. You got to give SI a little bit of credit. And I do love Twitter, though. And I will say this, the response has been overwhelming. People loved it. At Detroit Podcast blew up. You're reacting. You're liking all the commentary. You're liking the reporting. You're liking DocNJock. You're liking all the podcasts that are out there. Everybody that says, hey, we love your Thursday podcast. We love your work. We love everything going on. Thank you. But at the same token, I get it. You guys are a nervous Nelly bunch of group that's out there, and I did hear it because it was crazy. I didn't know, so I went out to the bookstore before we talked, and people were out there. It's not available. It's not available on the shelves yet. It's coming, but it's not available yet, and it will come. You'll have an opportunity to buy it. But at the same token, a couple people were like, "Oh, are you here for the SI magazine?" And I just said, "Yeah, I have an affiliation, so it looks like it's not out yet." So there's some demand for it, and it made me happy. But there is something there. It's not as bad as the Madden jinx, but we have to bring it up. Are you nervous because Penei Sewell was on the cover with St. Brown and Jared Goff? And St. Brown and Penei Sewell was the first guy to go down with an injury at practice. Do you believe? Because I did think it when I saw the cover. I said, "Oh no, the SI jinx." But look, 5 months from now, people may even forget that the Lions were on the cover. Some will remember. But are you concerned about the SI cover jinx? Because that comment definitely floated on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast.
Yeah, I mean, initially when I found out that they were getting the cover, and then I looked at the cover, and I was like, "Oh man, we already went through. We named what the top 4 guys who can't get hurt on this team, and
right.
You have 3 of the top 4 guys on that team or on that cover. So yeah, I'm nervous.
Oh God,
look, it's not the Madden cover, right? It's not the Madden cover. In going back through history, Calvin Johnson broke that curse. Maybe these guys can shake this curse.
Yeah.
Who knows? The Lions, the most cursed team in NFL history, but initially a little cause for pause with them getting the cover of SI and then getting picked to win the Super Bowl. It's a little uncomfortable to be in this spot. We're not used to this, so it'll be what it is. It's good to be here. It's good to have this limelight, yes. But it is hot underneath that limelight, and
yes.
It's uncomfortable because we've never had it before.
but read the story. Please go read it. Invest your time. It's a beautifully done feature. It's SI quality in the manner in which everybody loves it. It's storytelling. It weaves a beautiful story about the city, the mindset, Dan Campbell, what his vision was. And if you follow Lions on SI, Detroit Sports Podcast, we've told you the story along the way, but this is encapsulating it in a written form to basically stamp what we've told you. It's a hardworking team. They found hardworking guys that can get kicked and come back. This football team started with a poor record, and Sheila Hamp stood there in front of the media and took questions when they were losing. And I asked her directly, other rebuilds like the Giants are, they've already won a playoff game. Where are you at? And she said, I trust that the people that are telling me that this will work, I trust. And she looked me right in the face and said, I can't speak for what other organizations are doing, but I can trust that the leadership here will turn it around. And then they went on a winning streak. So it's just unbelievable that Dan Campbell's led this. It's turned around the franchise, a lot of positivity. It's a celebrity type thing where everyone wants to be a part of it. And to be, in a situation to just be a small part of the media that's covering it, and to be part of SI to see how they put together something like that was crazy. And again, it meant something because people reacted to it. And I retweeted people that said, it's the greatest picture I've ever seen. I'm going to cry reading the story. I'm going to put the picture as my screensaver. So, the journalism, deep reporting world has changed, and there's still room for that, but it's a different era, and people are ADD, and we've adapted to it. And look, me and Adam, legitimately, on a Thursday, I could sit here today, and we just now talked about the Lions for an hour. I could talk to Adam about Javi Baez and why I'm pissed that he's playing. I could talk to him about the Pistons and what the hell the roster is a disaster, and I'm so disappointed that they're going to win 20 games next year, and this is going to take forever. I could talk to him about the Red Wings and when are they going to put their nuts on the table and declare when they're going to make the playoffs. We could do 4 or 5 hours of podcasts every single day, easily, but we know people's time. We know people like 30 to 45 minutes to an hour max. We're not Joe Rogan here trying to talk to each other for 5 hours a day. So we understand the changing times, but it doesn't knock the value of Detroit Sports Podcast or Sports Illustrated. So I'm just happy to be part of it, happy that I can share with you information that's gathered from covering the Detroit Lions, and we can have a much more nuanced conversation. Adam is as dialed into sports as anybody out there. He knows what's going on and can bring honest, realistic opinions to what's going on. So it meant the world to get the reaction online at Detroit Podcast. And here we go. Let's see. It's about time. We're about to be 2 weeks away from the start of the season. And it's kind of like the training camp was kind of like getting to the amusement park. Now we're steadily on the ride, and it's starting to go up. And the thrill is about to come, and it's about to turn that corner at the top of the hill. And once it goes down, get ready, guys. Detroit Sports Podcast, SI, will be there along the way to guide you through and give you all the information needed as the 2024 season goes on, because there's a legitimate chance this football team wins a Super Bowl, and this is the start of it. And Adam has done a great job laying out everything that happened at training camp, and I can't wait for the next couple weeks when we get to dissect the roster and how it's going to play out as the 2024 season starts in earnest against the Rams. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow Detroit Sports Podcast at Detroit Podcast. Interact, like, share, tweet. Hit us up. We always enjoy the interaction. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in for the last hour. We appreciate your time. Enjoy Thursday. Enjoy Saturday at Ford Field. It's going to be a fun time. And let's really dig into this roster next week. For Adam Strozinski, I'm John Macaroon. I can't wait to fire up the next week's podcast for the latest edition of Doc and Jock.